Tom picked out that song right there, Who's Gonna Feed Them Hogs? Before I ever heard your version of that, I heard a bluegrass version of that by a wonderful singer, songwriter from up in Virginia named Jim Eames. He recorded that song.
I didn't know that. I knew Jim.
Yeah.
I knew Jim.
You worked in Virginia for a while, didn't you? You were in Roanoke area, weren't you?
Yeah, I went to school in Roanoke. I went to Roanoke College on the GI Bill, and they learned me English up there. And I was there for a long time. I was there for a couple of years. I came here from Roanoke. That's where I was when I... Mm-hmm. They called me and said, you want to come to Nashville? And I says, you know, I was sending some songs down here. And they said, can you live on $50 a week? I said, it's worked so far. So they said, well, come on down then. So I said, wait a minute. I said, I'll come down on January 1st because I can't really, I have no... I look back at my life and everything happened in the last couple of weeks. I have no recollection. So I said, I'll come down on January 1st in case anybody ever asks me. And
that's when you arrived.
January 1st, 1964.
How about that? Now, when you were there in Roanoke, you talked about going to college. You studied, what were you studying there?
I was studying American literature and English, and I was going to be a journalist or write books. I wanted to write books.
This is interesting because I don't know if it's ever been discussed much, but you share a parallel with Bill Anderson in that respect because he was a journalism major and went to college and was a songwriter and came here as a songwriter primarily, although he had made a few records, a couple of records before he got here. Did you play music in Roanoke? I mean, that was big country for people like Jim Eames and Don Reno and Red Smiley up there around Roanoke.
I'd get up every morning and turn on the TV, and there was Reno and Smiley, you know, and so we had, when they were, you know, living around Roanoke, and that's when Carlton Haney promoted the first Bluegrass Festival right along in there somewhere. Mm-hmm. Carlton lived there. And Jim Eames lived around there somewhere.
Martinsville.
Of course, I didn't. You know, I didn't have any reason to know these people because I was you know, just gotten out of the Army and disc jockeyed a couple of years and decided to go back to school. So I was there as a student and worked part time at WBLU, a radio station there, and which was right across the street from the campus. So I was pretty busy when I was in Roanoke. I didn't play in a band or anything, but I was sending my songs to Nashville.
Who were you sending them to here? Is it one publisher in particular?
New Keys Music. Jimmy Key was running New Keys Music. And
his partner was Jimmy Newman. That's where the name came from, New Keys Music. Right. Jimmy Newman and Jimmy Keys.
And I sent some songs down, and so they called me one day and said, you know, if you want to come to Nashville. I said, well, I'll come down January 1st. And I've been here somewhere in the neighborhood ever since. And I got to Nashville on, you see, that was the day after New Year's Eve. And this was a different culture in those days. It was 3 days before Nashville sobered up and knew that I was in town, you know. I mean, these were all...
Farthest town is still that way.
These were all musicians, you know, and so I had 3 days to kind of orientate myself and drive around. But most everything was closed for 3 or 4 days there. Finally, I walked in and I said, I'm Tom T. Hall. And they said, and I said, is this the publishing company I'm writing songs for? They said, yes. They said, here's your portable tape recorder, and here's a bunch of tapes. You go home and you write songs, and you bring them in on Friday, and you turn them in, and we'll give you your $50. So I went up someplace and rented a little, I think it was $10 a week apartment. $10 a month back in those days. And I had me a little portable typewriter, and I wrote songs, and I'd write them, and I'd get my guitar, and I'd sing them on this little recorder, and I'd take them down on Friday, and I'd stack all these tapes up, and they'd give me a check for $50, and that went on for, you know, a couple of years, and then I had a couple of songs recorded here and there. And
what was the first song you got cut here in Nashville?
I called it If I Could Be a DJ for a Day.
1963, Jimmy Newman cut that for Decca.
Well, see, you know more about that than I do. I thought it was the last couple of weeks. But, yeah, and I was somewhere, and I'm sitting there, and And I heard this record on the radio, and I heard some, Jimmy Newman singing it. I didn't know Jimmy. And I thought, that's wonderful. I'm sitting out here in, well, see, I was still in West Virginia at the time, Virginia. I'm sitting out here in some place on the side of the road, and I hear my song playing over the radio, and I thought, wow, that's weird, I made that song up, and I sent it down there, and they recorded it, and now I'm hearing it back over the radio. And I kind of liked it, I said, good idea.
But that was before you got here, obviously.
That was before I got here, yeah.
But that was the first song you got cut here in town.
And it's the first song I got recorded in Nashville, right?
That was a top 10 record, too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I traveled around with Jimmy, playing lead guitar for him for a little while. And he's one of the funniest guys in the world, got that Cajun sense of humor. I wanted to mention another friend of mine this year. I'm not running for anything, I'm retired, but Tom Collins is here. Tom Collins is my agent.
I'm sorry I didn't go through him. He's probably going to want a commission and be after me.
Well, see, Tom is very lazy and he's rich. And he wanted something to do, so I think he's taken up being agents for retired people. It's sort of like being a consultant, And
don't say that word.
His son Bradley works for a living, and Bradley's with him here tonight. But I'm very fond of those people, and I wanted to mention their name. And I think the Ernest Tubb record shop is closed. I've got a whole bunch. I'm so flattered that a whole bunch of people here from the Ernest Tubb record shop.
No, they just got people covering for them so they could come tonight.
Yeah, okay. They are wonderful people, and you can call them and ask them about, people walk in there and say, you got any Tom T. Hall records? And they don't say, who? They say, yeah, So that's wonderful, yeah.
That's a great thing, and we appreciate those folks a lot for sure. Tom T. Hall is our special guest here tonight. All these stories that we're talking about are so wonderful, and you are known as the storyteller. How did you come to get that name, or who bestowed that name upon you?
I went on a tour of, we went to Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Hong Kong. I think that was the tour. There was a whole bunch of us, and Tex Ritter was the master of ceremonies for the tour. And may I tell a little Tex Ritter story? Everybody's got a Tex Ritter story.
Sure.
His wife Dorothy is with him, and they're sitting over on that side of the plane, and I'm over here. And Tex is leaning across the aisle talking to me. And he said, Tom T., he said, when we get to Japan, I want you to get one of those Japanese baths and one of those Japanese massages by one of those geisha girls. He said, the Japanese women are trained to be very nice to men, and they are the most charming, lovely. And he looked over his shoulder, and Dorothy's looking at him. And so he says, so I've been told.
By one of those Japanese women on a prior visit to Japan without Dorothy, right?
But anyway, we got on that tour, and Tex started introducing me. He would say, here's a young man who considers himself a storyteller, Tom T. Hall, and he would bring me out. Well, I'd go to the coffee shop in the morning, I'd show up, and everybody's sitting around. Here comes the storyteller, they're mimicking Tex. But the nickname kind of stuck, and then on that tour, people started calling me the storyteller. So Tex Ritter named me the storyteller, and then I came back, and Jerry Kennedy said, why don't we just call our next album The Storyteller? And so that's how I came by that.
I'm trying to put this in perspective chronologically. What year did Tex die? 72, 73, somewhere in that period of time? So it was prior to that, obviously, that you got this
It would have
name.
been late 60s or early 70s, because I was not really a big act or anything. But what I did? I took a dobro player over there with me, and they had never seen one. And so I'd go out and do my show, and the dobro player kept getting all these standing ovations. I'm going, hey, I'm in the band too over here, you know. But they loved the sound of a picking dobro. Slide dobro is what we called it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a great tour, and I found out when you get to Japan, a banjo is a restroom, you know. Don't lose your banjo because people keep sending you to the restroom, you know.
Tom T. Hall's travel service at your disposal tonight here.
Yeah.
Tom T. Hall is our special guest. It's a minute after 8 o'clock. This is WSM Nashville. This is our monthly Intimate Evening Series program. If you're just joining us tonight, I'm Eddie Stubbs, and we are having a wonderful evening here. A capacity crowd here tonight at the Ford Theater of the Country Music Hall of Fame Museum. This portion of our broadcast...